Hi guys, my name is Dawne Christine,
And I'm Dee May.
and welcome to the very first episode of the Purposeful Wisdom podcast. So, today we wanted to do a little bit of an introduction about ourselves and why we came together to do such a podcast. It was always my dream to bring knowledge and wisdom to people that have gone through a lot of difficult things in their lives. And so I decided to reach out on Facebook to see if someone would want to help me bring this to life. And I met Miss Dee May, and we had a lot in common with each other. We had a lot of stories and experiences. And the more we got to talking, the more we knew that we had to bring this thing to life. So welcome in. How you doing today, Dee?
I'm doing great. Thank you. And I'm so glad to be joining you on this wonderful podcast. We're going to do so many episodes that are going to reach people and help them and create a safe space for people to come in and dialogue about some of these things that maybe they might be uncomfortable talking about if they didn't have a safe space to do that in. So I'm really excited about it.
Oh, I love the fact you're absolutely doing this with me. This is a match made in heaven for sure. I know we come from different backgrounds and we have different paths as far as our coaching. So I would love for you to tell people exactly what you do and how you help people through things that they're having difficulties with.
So I am a self-love and mindset coach. And the reason I got into that is because of my own personal experiences with a lack of self-love in my life and not having the right mindset to get out of some really bad situations that I was in. So learning to love myself has been a very profound experience for me, and it has completely changed my life and enabled me to put up healthy boundaries and just leave the toxicity behind. So it's been really amazing for me. And that is why I want to help other people learn to love themselves too.
Love that. And same for me. So my background, so everyone knows watching, I specialize in trauma and toxic relationships. And I too had a lot of that going on in my life. And I want to teach people how to avoid those things, or if they're in those things right now, know the tools and tricks to come out of that, to learn how to walk away from anything that doesn't serve them. And I know since we've been discussing different ideas and topics of how we're going to bring this podcast life, we have so many things. I know you could agree that we want to share with our audience, and how to avoid these things, what certain things look like, because I feel, as we've discussed before, a lot of people don't even recognize what certain things are and if they are toxic for them.
Absolutely. And abuse has many faces. And let's face it, that's what toxicity is. It's abuse. Um, Calling a spade is really important to me since I figured out that I was in three abusive relationships that I think we throw the word toxic around because it's a lot easier to say than abusive. But bottom line is they're abusive relationships, and that's why they're toxic. And understanding what those look like and being able to call it what it is the first step to me of being able to get out of the situation, because it's one thing to not feel comfortable, not like the situation, but when you can name it, then I think that gives you power so that you can start taking steps to get yourself strong enough to leave the situation.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. And I think the goal here that, from both of us is to create, like you said, that safe space where people can turn to and people can really relate to the things that we're going to be discussed, because not only are we going to bring forth our own personal experiences with certain topics that we are going to be discussing on this podcast, but we plan on having a lot of great guest speakers to come on and share their experiences and their personal stories with us too. So, I know knowledge is power. And the more we can unite as a community and create a safe space for people to come to and learn and feel validated and feel heard, I think this is a great space for people to do that. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. I do. I absolutely agree. Being heard is a very important thing, and it's downplayed, I think, by so many people, but we all want to feel heard and we all want to feel validated in our feelings and emotions. So I think that's super important.
Absolutely. And a lot of people will downplay the fact that it's not important to feel validated, like that their truths don't matter. And that's far from the truth itself. Your truth is yours. And for things that you've experienced in your life, that is your truth. And a lot of people feel that if they're dismissed on a certain topic, or if they're not made to feel validated, that it doesn't matter and that it's not important. And that's this space that we're trying to create here on this channel, is just to promote the fact that your truth is yours, and things that have happened in your life are in fact your truth, and no one should be dismissing that in any sort of way, shape, or form. This is something that you know personally are experiencing, and to know that you are validated is so important for self-growth, and realizing that it is okay to, you know, take any of the toxicity out of it in order for yourself to grow, for sure.
Absolutely. And it does take that. We have to get rid of that toxicity to make room for the growth. And that's just, I mean, that's just a hard fact. We have to get rid of it to make room for the growth. And it's so amazing because the more you grow, the more you do the self work and you get into your guts and you figure out what's making you tick and what you really want out of life. It just kind of naturally pushes that toxicity away, and you learn to stand in your own power and move forward with your life. And it's such a beautiful thing. It's not always easy. It's not always easy. You know, sometimes
Not at
it's
all.
sometimes it's a moment by moment thing. You have to really, you know, coach yourself a lot. I mean, I know I do. Some days I feel like it's all day
Absolutely.
long. I'm like really coaching myself. So it's not something that ends. And I don't want that to seem daunting to people when I say that, because I like to look at it this way. You can't eat one meal. You can't just eat one giant meal and expect it to sustain you for the rest of your life. You have to feed your body every day. So if you think of it like that, you're going to feed your body every day. So you're going to do the self work every day and keep learning and growing. That's, you know, we're just going to keep doing that until we're not here anymore. I mean, it's just part of the circle of life, I believe.
Absolutely. And so, and growing is crucial. I mean, we're not supposed to be stagnant in life, and knowledge is power. And the more you learn and the more you grow, the more you're going to have a self-fulfilled life. And I love the fact that you brought that up, that healing is not an overnight thing. And I think that's really important for people to understand, because it didn't take, you know, it took so many years for things to evolve, and it's not going to be an overnight fix. And growing and learning and healing is not an overnight process. It takes sometimes a short amount of time for certain people, depending on the issue, and sometimes it takes years, and sometimes it is an everlasting long journey, because there are triggers that sometimes come up, and there are certain situations that could trigger a certain situation, and it's learning how to cope with those things. It's learning how to have your tool of healthy ways of coping in order for you to keep evolving. And it's not an overnight fix. And I think that's so important to let our viewers know, because, you know, but at the same time, I hope that they feel that they have the space to grow with us, to learn from us, to learn from our great podcast guests that are going to be coming on this show and teaching us more and more things. And the way I look at it is, the more tools that you have in your toolbox to grow as a person, the more successful you're going to be in learning how to cope with those triggers, learning what toxic relationships look like, learning what abuse looks like, learning what gaslighting looks like, you know. So I really hope that moving forward, all of our viewers come together as a community. I know for a fact we want to create a safe space for people to just be and learn and grow and not feel judged in any way. We want to meet people where they are. And I think that's really important moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel that also. And one thing I wanted to say also is, as we heal and we get into healthier relationships, we're not done healing. When you're in a healthy relationship, things are still going to come up that you realize that you need to still heal that a little bit more. So, and that's okay. That's perfectly normal. That doesn't mean there's something wrong with you and that you didn't do it right. That just means that there's another facet to that particular thing that you need to take a look at and maybe learn how to see from a different perspective.
Absolutely, especially when you're in a toxic relationship or an abusive relationship for a long time, and now something healthy comes towards you, you automatically think that it's a threat or what's this person's intention. So it's really learning to have grace with yourself too, and learn that just because things were a certain way in your past doesn't mean that it may repeat with something healthy, because a lot of people that are comfortable being in toxic relationships and they're maybe unmotivated to leave or don't know how to leave, and then when something normal comes along, people get scared and they're like, wait a minute, what's this person's intentions? Because you're automatically in survival mode. You automatically think that the other shoe is going to drop and that this person has a motive behind it. And it's
Yeah.
really learning what is true and what are triggers. And I think that throughout this show, we're going to teach people those red flags. We're going to make them aware of what those red flags look like so that they know the difference between what an abusive, toxic relationship looks like and what something healthy looks like, right?
Absolutely.
At the end of the
Absolutely.
day.
Because when you're in a toxic relationship, especially for a very long time, and then you get into a healthy relationship, it feels strange because even though you didn't like the toxic relationship, you were comfortable there, not because you enjoyed the abuse, but because you know what to expect and you've been experiencing it for so long. And then when you get in a healthy relationship, it feels very strange because you're not used to being treated well. You're not used to someone being there to help you just because they want to help you with no ulterior motive or no, thoughts of, that you're stupid because you can't do this or whatever. It's just they're genuinely there to help you. So it does feel strange and unusual, but it gets to be a very beautiful thing really quickly if you allow yourself to notice those things come up and handle them with grace.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I think also as people learn their boundaries and what their limits are, and if it is, serving them for the best interest of them too, to recognize what healthy behavior looks like versus gaslighting versus belittling. So it's really learning to navigate the waters and give yourself the grace, and if you have a healthy relationship, going to your partner, going to your significant other, and letting them understand too, this is new
Yeah.
and I'm, maybe I'm reacting a little off, but you kind of know what I've been through. So, if they're willing to work with you and they have that compassion and that grace themselves, that's a sign that it's healthy, that it's good because they understand where you came from and they're able to have patience and let you see things for what they are. I think actions speak louder than words more than anything. And if people's actions back up the words that they're saying, then that person is genuine and true. And that's huge in a relationship, along with communication and trust, obviously.
It absolutely is. And while we're on this topic, I'd like to point out it's not just romantic relationships that can be toxic. There can also be toxic family relationships and toxic friendships, toxic work environments. So these are all things to be mindful of, so we understand that it can come in many different varieties and not just the romantic relationship, which I think is where most of our minds
Absolutely.
go automatically when we start talking about these things.
Right, absolutely. You're absolutely right about that. And it's in all forms. And I think once people learn, who is, serving them to their best interest as far as being a healthy, person in their lives that inspires them, that helps them grow, and who's taking away that energy and kind of placing people in boxes, so to speak, who is, benefiting my life in a healthy way, and who's just being energy vampires and draining you, and learning, the branches of the tree, the roots of the tree, and the leaves, so to speak, and knowing how to navigate, and also teaching people how to love from a distance too, I think is crucial, because
Yeah.
it is hard in family structures. It is hard, when you are in a certain family structure. And I know this to be true with me. It's hard to, separate yourself from your family circle, so to speak, especially when you're in a toxic, unhealthy relationship in a family structure. So it's learning to love them from a distance, but also knowing that their toxicity cannot be yours, and you have to live your own life, and you have to do what's best for you moving forward. And it's up to them whether they choose to, navigate their lives differently. But at the end of the day, it's what's going to best serve you and what is healthy for you. And I think that is the overall goal of this podcast, is to help people understand what healthy relationships in general look like, and what to do if they aren't.
Absolutely. And it's super important. And I also had some of that family dynamic going on in my life. And when I had so many people say, you need to cut those people out of your life. You need to cut those people out. And I didn't want to, because I'm like, I really love them. I don't want to do that, But in the end, I had to put that boundary up because it was so harmful to me. And then I have this phrase that I use for that kind of situation, and I call it the living dead, because it's like they're not a part of your life, but they're still living, and it's a choice. So to me, it was actually harder than when those people actually crossed over. It was harder for me when they were living, because they were choosing that. Whereas when there's a death, then there's no longer a choice, because that person has crossed over. So it's a really interesting situation, but I had to get myself to a place in my life where I realized that I get to be happy, whether those people are approving of me or whether they're not. So, and being happy and sad at the same time is the most bizarre feeling, but you get to do that. You can be sad over that situation, but still choose happiness as a whole in your life. So I think that's really, really super important for people to know.
Absolutely. And another thing I want to piggyback off of that is, my whole thing was that, and I know you've heard me say this before, title does not equal entitlement. And that was a really hard thing for me to understand too, because a lot of people would have said to me in the past, oh, well, it's you're this, or it's you're that. And well, it doesn't matter just because they're a spouse or a parent or a brother or sister. It doesn't entitle them to treat you the way that they are treating you. And that's one of the hardest things for people to break the chains of, is because they feel like, oh, well, because they're my mom, my dad, my sister, my husband, my wife, my boss, that they are entitled to disrespect and treat you a certain way. Not at all. We
Right.
all bleed the same color, and we're all human beings, and we all have purpose in life. And, we have to do our own thing and live our own lives. And just because they are in a place of title, it does not entitle them to do the things and justify why they're doing them to you. So I think it's our responsibility to teach people how to build their boundaries. A lot of people just don't have boundaries when it comes to a toxic family structure or a toxic relationship in general. They feel that they have to bow down because of that title status. And I think that's one of the things I know we've talked about before, is just like, nope, it doesn't matter title, it doesn't matter who you are. People should be kind to people. People should be treated with respect and dignity and grace. And that's something that I know both of us want to educate people about on this podcast.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, when I was in elementary school, we had this thing that was so popular that everybody taught in school back then, and it was called the Golden Rule. And they don't really teach that anymore. But what that basically says for people who are younger and they haven't heard it before is do unto others as you would have them do unto you. You know, if you don't want someone treating you a certain way, then don't treat them a certain way, but expect that in return also. Like if you don't treat them badly, then don't accept them treating you badly, no matter who they are, you know?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And realistically, too, what I've learned too is, sometimes you have to be graceful because in certain relationships, a lot of people go to that vengeance mindset of like, oh, I want to get revenge. And
Yeah.
honestly, for me personally, it was so much easier knowing who I was and what my core values were, and just literally just walking away and not getting vengeful
Yeah.
on the other person or not trying to belittle them because I didn't want to match my energy to theirs. I knew that, I didn't want to be anything like that. So for me, walking away was the best thing. It wasn't bad mouthing, it wasn't talking crap about the other person. It was just knowing who I was as a person and sticking to my core values of what makes me me and just letting it go because silence is golden too. Silence sometimes says everything.
It
It
absolutely
really
does.
does.
I agree with that. Silence says way more than words ever can sometimes. Sure.
Absolutely. So I think moving forward, people need to understand that too. We're definitely not saying, an eye for an eye. That's not what we're
No,
saying at all. It's knowing who you are and realizing that, people have choices and you could either choose to know who you are down to the core and walk away and start to believe new belief systems around what you've experienced, because it does go back to belief systems
mhm.
and learning if those belief systems were what you learned in your life were actually right, or you have to start from scratch and learn a whole new set of belief systems, because a lot of people don't just trauma and abuse is not only physical, it's mental and emotional too. There's all sorts of abuse out there, and these are the things that I know you and I want to educate people on and realize abuse can come in so many forms, and it's just sticking to knowing who you are. And if you're not sure who you are because of the beliefs that you were taught, either in early childhood or even in your adult life, it's actually questioning yourself of, well, do I know this to be true? And do I know, like, is this fact?
Right.
Are what these people saying about me fact, or another person fact? So it's really learning, or maybe having to relearn belief systems in order to have those boundaries in play, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And when you were talking about that, it reminded me that I remember the day, not the date, but I remember the day when I was in my last toxic relationship and he was standing in front of me screaming this list of horrible things at me. And I didn't say anything
Oh,
out loud, but as he was saying each thing in my head, it was like I was making a list, like I was writing it down in my head. And he would say something and I would be like, No, that's a lie." And then he'd say something else and I would go, "That's not true about me at all. Like, that's not even close. Like, I'm totally not like that." And I did that with this list of things that he kept throwing at me. And like I said, he was so volatile, I didn't dare say it out loud. But in my head, I was doing that. And then it was a really powerful moment for me in my life because that's when I realized that just because someone says mean things to you doesn't mean you have to take them on and believe them about yourself. When someone says something about you and you know it's not true, you do not have to believe it, even if they say it to you every single day. You do not have to believe it. You have the choice of what you believe about yourself. And, when you have self love and you have a strong mindset, then it affects every area of your life. It affects your friendships, it affects how you present yourself in public situations like parties or, group get-togethers. It affects your job. It affects everything. So when you get that sense of self, it completely changes your life. And it's absolutely amazing.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Well, I think our guests are going to be in for a real treat with us. I know that we're going to be getting together here in the next couple of days and starting some episodes. So, both of us wanted to jump on here and, obviously introduce ourselves to you guys, just learn about what the topics we're going to be talking about. Dee, do you have anything else to say? I want to give you the space too to say anything to our viewers as well before we sign off.
No, I'm just really super excited about this podcast and creating this community. I'm really excited about some of the guests that we have lined up to share their insight. And we won't always be doing these tough topics. We will do some fun topics from time to time just to mix it up and and just have some fun too, because I feel like that's important as well.
Absolutely. We're going to balance this out. We're going to talk about a lot of happy things and a lot of funny things. And I mean, you guys, we have so many great stories to share with you moving forward. And we want to thank you for joining with us and taking the time to just view this. And we hope to see you on the next podcast. So you guys be well and take care.
Yes, and we do like to close our podcast with a quote. So I am going to just read a quote real quickly. One of my favorite people to quote
Absolutely.
is Wayne Dyer. Anybody who knows me knows, like,
Yes.
he has been my rock. He really has been my rock over my self-love journey. So he said, "When you stay on purpose and refuse to be discouraged by fear, you align with the infinite self in which all possibilities exist."
Hence purposeful wisdom.
Exactly. Thank you so much. We look forward to seeing y'all next time.
Bye, guys. Take care.